All right, ladies and gents, this is Mr. Vanderpool. We're going to go ahead and continue here with comparative advantage. Now we're going to relate it to production possibilities curves, which we've already talked about a little bit. So what we're going to have here is we have a chart of Ireland and Puerto Rico, and the chart basically tells us how much crystal and or rum they can make. So they're trading off between making crystal and making rum. And we're going to go ahead and plot these points on a production possibilities curve. And both of these production possibilities curves are going to be constant opportunity cost production possibilities curves. Therefore, they are going to be straight, okay, because they're constant production opportunity cost production possibilities curves. So let's go ahead and plot these points here on our y-axis for both Ireland and Puerto Rico. We have crystal, and then we have rum on our x-axis. So for Ireland, we have 1,000,000 crystal, 0 rum, 700,000 crystal, 30,000 rum, 100,000 rum, 0 crystal. And we, for Puerto Rico, 80,000 crystals, 0 rum, 40,000 crystal, and 40,000 rum, and then 0 crystal, and 80,000 rum. So we have straight production possibilities curves right there because they're constant opportunity cost production possibilities curves. So we're going to use these two production possibilities curves to figure out comparative and absolute advantage. All right, so we have here which country has the absolute advantage in the production of crystal as well as the production of rum. Well, if they maximize their use of resources here, looks like Ireland can make more crystal as well as more rum, because they can make 100,000 rum and 1,000,000 crystal. Puerto Rico can only make 80,000 rum and 80,000 crystal. So it is going to be Ireland who has the absolute advantage in the production of crystal as well as rum. All right, now we're going to figure out which country has a comparative advantage in crystal and in rum. So there are 5 steps to figuring out which country has the comparative advantage. First step is we need to know the definition of comparative advantage. One entity can produce something at a lower marginal opportunity cost than another entity. If it can produce something at a lower opportunity cost, then it has a comparative advantage. Remember, we're looking for the lower number. Who gives up less when we're looking at comparative advantage? Then we're going to go ahead and set up a table, and the table is going to look like this. And this table is very essential. So we're going to look at Ireland. And Ireland, we're going to see if they focus on making 1 rum, how many crystal are they going to give up? If they focused on making 1 crystal, how many rum are they going to give up? Then we're going to go ahead and look at Puerto Rico and say if they focused on making 1 rum, how many crystal are they giving up? If they focused on making 1 crystal, how many rum are they giving up? And then we're going to go ahead and go to the extremes, the x and the y-axis, to fill out that table. Okay, so we'll go into those extremes. All right, so now let's go ahead and fill out that table. We're going to fill in the blanks, starting with Puerto Rico first. And we're going to focus in, start off when we make 1 rum. So right there, if we're looking at for Puerto Rico, we're looking at rum. We can see on our x-axis we've got 80,000 rum. at point C there. We need to get that down to 1. So we're going to divide by 80,000. If we're going to go ahead and do that on the x-axis, then we need to go ahead and do divide by 80,000. If we divide by 80,000 on our x-axis, we have to divide by that same number on our y-axis there at point A. So we do 80,000 divided by 80,000, so 1 rum is equal to 1 crystal. So if they focused on making rum, they're giving up 1 crystal. Now we're going to go ahead and do the same thing with crystal here. So if we focused in on making 1 crystal, you can see at point A we got 80,000, so we divide by 80,000. We do the same thing on our x-axis at point C. Take 80,000, divide by 80,000, and you get 1. Okay, so if Puerto Rico focused on making crystal, for every 1 crystal they're giving out 1 rum. Now let's focus in on Ireland. So let's focus in on Ireland if it was focusing on 1 rum. So we'll look on our x-axis there at 100,000 on point C. So we have to get that down to 1. So we divide by 100,000. Do the same thing on our x-axis at point A. You have 1 million. 1 million divided by 100,000 is 10. So for every 1 rum, they would give up 10 crystal. Now let's focus in on crystal. So at point A, divide by 1 million to get it down to 1. Go to point C, divide by 1 million to get 100,000 divided by 1 million is going to be 1/10. 1 over 10. So now we have to figure out who gives up less, who has the comparative advantage in rum and crystal. So let's start off looking at rum here. So Ireland, if it focuses on rum, has to give up 10 crystal. Puerto Rico, if it focuses on rum, for every 1 rum it's giving up 1 crystal. So who's giving up less crystal to make rum? That is Puerto Rico. So therefore, Puerto Rico is going to have the comparative advantage in making rum. Now, let's take a look at crystal here. So Ireland, if they focus on making 1 crystal, they give up 1/10 of a rum. Puerto Rico, if they focus on making 1 crystal, they're going to give up 1 rum. So Ireland's going to give up less rum. So therefore, Ireland is going to have the comparative advantage in making crystal. So Ireland has the comparative advantage in crystal. Puerto Rico has the comparative advantage in making rum because they are giving up less to produce the other good. So according to economic theory, these countries should specialize where they have the comparative advantage in trade. So because of that, Ireland should produce all the crystal because it has the comparative advantage. Puerto Rico should produce all the rum because it has the comparative advantage. So how much crystal should Ireland produce? 1 million cases because they're going to focus in on making all the crystal. Puerto Rico should produce all the rum, which is 80,000 barrels. Now, should Ireland just hold on to its cases of crystal and Puerto Rico just hold on to its barrels of rum? No, they want to trade after they specialize. So that way they can both become better off. Alright, so ladies and gents, next we're going to go ahead and take a look at what happens when Ireland and Puerto Rico trade with each other versus if they trade off between making crystal and rum. And we're going to see that there are gains from trade from that. Now, before we get into that, I want to say that in this scenario, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be trading 175,000 crystal for 35,000 rum. So that is a 5-to-1 margin, crystal to rum. So the trade between Ireland and Puerto Rico is going to be at that 5-to-1 margin. If we're looking at Ireland as it trade-offs between making crystal and rum, as you go from A to B, for example, they give up 300,000 crystal for 30,000 rum. So it is trading off at a 10-to-1 margin from crystal to rum. Now Puerto Rico is going to be trading off as it moves from point to point on its production possibilities curve at a 1-to-1 margin, because as you go from A to B, you're giving up 40,000 crystal for 40,000 rum. So Ireland's trading off at a 10-to-1 margin. Puerto Rico is trading off at a 1-to-1 margin, and this trade is going to be at a 5-to-1 margin. 175,000 crystal for 35,000 rum. So let's go ahead and take a look at Ireland here. So we're going to start off at point A, where Ireland's making 1,000,000 crystal and 0 rum. And then they're going to go ahead and trade 175,000 crystal for 35,000 rum. So 1,000,000 minus 175, and then you take 0 plus 35,000. After that trade, Ireland's got 825,000 crystal and 35,000 rum. So let's say that Ireland decides that they're not going to trade. Instead, they're going to go ahead and just move from point A to point B. They would be at 70,000 crystal and 30,000 rum. So therefore, you can see there's a gain of trade of 125,000 crystal and 5,000 rum. So Ireland became better off by trading instead of just moving along its production possibilities curve. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at Puerto Rico. So we'll start at 0 crystal and 80,000 rum. And we're going to trade away 35,000 rum, and we're going to get 175,000 crystal. So after specialization and trade, you're at 175,000 crystal and 45,000 rum. Now, if they moved from C to B instead of trading with their trading partner, they would be at 40,000, so 40,000 crystal and 40,000 rum. So you can see a gain of trade there of 135,000 crystal and 5,000 rum. So both of these countries actually became better off through specialization and trade. And the reason that happened is because these two countries were trading off at a 5-to-1 margin. And because that 5-to-1 margin was between the 10-to-1 margin that Ireland was trading off at and the 1-to-1 margin that Puerto Rico was trading off at, both countries are going to become better off. So if the trade is done at a margin that's between the margins in which countries are trading off on their production possibilities curves, then both countries will become better off after the trade. All right. Now, let's go ahead and plot some points here. So in Ireland, we have 825,000, 35,000. So we have 35,000, 825,000 would be about right there. So they can actually produce, after trading, they can produce beyond their production possibilities curve. And we'll call that point D. And then as far as Puerto Rico is concerned, they're at 175,000 crystal, which is way up there. And they are at 45,000 rum as well. So they also are better off. All right, so which country is obviously better off through the specialization trade, Ireland or Puerto Rico? They both are. Both countries are now outside their own production possibilities. Through specialization in trade, all parties are better off. And so once again, remember that is the economic theory. Okay? That countries will specialize, so they have their comparative advantage. They will trade, and they will both become better off. They'll both be able to produce beyond their production possibilities curve. All right, let's do the assessment. We're going to describe the difference between absolute and comparative advantage. We're going to describe how the idea of comparative advantage encourages specialization and international trade. So you have to pause this for a second. That's perfectly fine. And we have the summary. In a paragraph, describe what you have learned today. And I will check these tomorrow. You have a good one. Bye-bye.